Today I'll be showing you how to knit the 3-part boomerang heel with shadow wraps. I've prepared a little sample and here we go. So this is where my round starts. This is my needle number 1 and this is my needle number 4. So you would count usually 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm knitting my heel over needle 1 and 4. It is called the 3-part heel because there's a part on one side where you work short rows and a part on the other side where you work short rows, and the center stitches remain the same, which is the back of your heel. I always knit it according to the Regia table, which is like my reference chart that I use all the time, and I will also link it in the video here. Basically for my size, I knit a size 38. It will call for a 10-10-10 division. So I have 60 stitches for my 4-thread, 4-ply yarn on here. And so it says that I need to work 10 short rows from this side and 10 stitches on this side, and the middle 10 stitches remain unchanged. All right, let's get going. So basically it's these 5 stitches have to stay the same, but the short rows are worked from here. So I will knit towards the end of the first side. Now here on the last stitch, this is where the magic happens with the shadow wraps. So instead of knitting my last stitch, I am going to pick up the stitch below it. You can see that the stitch below, so the say has 2 sides, the side in the front and the side on this side of the stitch. So you pick up this part of the stitch below and you put it onto your needle. So now it looks like I have 2 stitches, and the part that you just picked up, this part right here, is the one that you knit. And you do put it right back on the needle because we're not going to knit it again. So I knitted it and I put it back on there, and now I have a double stitch on here. And now I'm gonna work on the wrong side. I'm going to turn it around so this stitch does not get knitted anymore. And now I'm going to purl all the way to the other side, the end of my needle 4. Okay, so now I have the last stitch here on my needle 4, which I'm also not going to knit. I am going to pick up the bottom stitch. Now this looks a little bit different because we are on the purl side, on the wrong side of our work. So instead of having a leg of the stitch on each side, we have this little scarf. We have this loop that wraps around the bottom here. So this loop is the one that you want to pick up. So I go from the bottom, I pick this up and I put it back on the needle. And I'm trying to hold them so they don't, so I can still see which stitch is which. And now I'm going to purl this stitch that I just picked up. So not the one that was there before, but the scarf that I picked up. I'm going to purl this and put it right back on to the needle with the yarn in front, like this. And now I'm going to turn my work again. Now we're gonna knit all the way to the other side again on needle 4 and on needle 1, and we will stop. So this stitch will not get worked. We're going to stop just before this stitch right there. Now we're back on the other side. So now we have this one stitch that already has a shadow wrap, and now we're going to work a shadow wrap on the next stitch right next to it. So we're picking up from the stitch below. It has one leg on this side and one leg on this side, and we're gonna pick up the one closest to our needle here, to our working needle, right there. Put it right on here, and I like to hold it a little bit back, and then the picked up stitch is the one that we knit. And then we put it right back on the needle, and the yarn stays in back. And now I have 2 of these doubled stitches that are our shadow wraps. Now we turn our work around once again. Reorganize our needles. Now I'm working again all the way to the other side of my needle 4, 1 stitch before our shadow wrap. So now this is my shadow wrap from last time, and this is the unworked stitch. So I do admit that on this side, on the purl side, is much harder to see the shadow wraps. I feel like they come out more on the other side, so you do have to be careful not to accidentally knit these 2. I just always count, but you could also put stitch markers after every single one, which would then stay there until you knit in full rounds again. But if that is more helpful to you, so you don't accidentally knit these stitches, feel free to use some stitch markers to achieve that. So I just remembered that I had 2 on the other side, which means that I need to work my second one here. So I'm picking up that scarf from this stitch that's wrapped around, put it onto the stitch, my yarn in front, and then sometimes if it's tricky to pick that up, I'm just going to stitch my needle in the back and then bring it over. Sometimes that slides in a little bit better. But so now I have the scarf on my needle with my yarn in front so that I can purl this stitch and put it right back onto the needle with my yarn in front. And now we turn it around again. So 2 shadow wraps on each side. Now we're going to work all the way to the other side again, to the last stitch before the 2 shadow wraps. Alright, now we're back on this side where we have the 2 shadow wraps and 1 unworked stitch now. So we're going to pick up the right leg of this stitch underneath, putting it onto that needle, and then we knit that stitch. And we're putting it right back onto the needle, and now we have 3 shadow wraps on this side. And we repeat to go back. Now we purl all the stitches until our 2 shadow wraps on the other side and 1 stitch before the 2 shadow wraps. Back here, so now we have our 1, 2 shadow wraps and 1 unworked stitch, and we pick up the scarf with the stitch from underneath here. And you could even have just realized we could have the yarn in front right away, so whichever works, but you do have to, in order to knit it, you do have to have it in front. So you can either bring it in front right away or do it after you pick it up. There you go. That might be much easier. There you go. I feel like it's different when you're making these videos. All right, so now we're gonna need to knit this stitch right here. And then we bring it right back onto the needle. All right, turn around, do another round. Now we're back on this side. 3 shadow wraps, 1 unworked stitch. Pick up the leg from the stitch underneath. Knit that pickup and put it right back onto the left needle. Turn around and repeat. Now we're back on this side, so we have our 1, 2, 3 shadow wrap stitches, 1 unworked stitch. We pick up that scarf from the stitch underneath, put it onto the needle, knit it, put that knitted stitch right back on. 4 shadow wraps. Turn around, continue. Shadow wrap on the 5th stitch on this side. Pick up this little leg, knit it, and put it right back onto the needle. So now we have 5 shadow wraps on this side. Now we purl all the way back to the other side. Right, here I am at my next unworked stitch. So we'll pick up the scarf right here, put it onto the needle, knit that picked up stitch, put it onto the needle with the yarn in front. Now we turn around and work the way back. We have 5 shadow wraps on each side, which means we have 5 more to go. So now I have worked my last shadow wrap. So now I have 10 shadow wraps here. I have 5 more stitches from this side left on here. 5 unworked stitches or 5 regular stitches and 10 shadow wraps. And that's what it looks like. You can see that you're getting this angle here. And so you've worked your decrease. Now we're gonna work 2 rows of just knit stitches over all of the stitches, and we will knit the shadow wraps as 1 stitch. here we are at our first shadow wrap, and I'm going to knit this as one stitch. So these were all my shadow wraps from needle 1, and you can see that it's already forming this really beautiful bend. So another thing I do when I do my heel with a shadow wrap is I make a stitch between needle 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 because this right here is a very common spot where you get a hole if your stitches are not tight enough. So we will temporarily, until we finish knitting our heel, we will make a stitch out of the thread in between. So this is your last stitch of needle 1, this is your first stitch of needle 2. So we're going to take this stitch, let me see if I can turn this better. So there's basically a thread, the thread, this one right here, that connects the two. We'll stitch in just from the front to the back and hold it like a stitch, and then instead of knitting it from the front, you're gonna knit it through the back. So a knit stitch through the back of your stitch, and then you have an extra stitch right here on needle 1, which we will decrease once our heel is done. So now I have 16 stitches on needle 1. I'm going to knit the 15 stitches of needle 2. And another 15 stitches of needle 3. Now because this is just a vanilla type pattern, it's all knit stitches. If you had a pattern, an eyelet pattern, or a braid, then you would be knitting in pattern over these stitches. Now before we do our shadow wraps, we are again going to make a stitch in between the last stitch of needle 3 and the first stitch of needle 4. So I'm going to take up that thread right here. Just take it up, put it on here as if it were one of the stitches, and then we will do a knit stitch through the back of the loop to get this one. All right. Sorry, I didn't do that right. Knit stitch, there you go. Knit stitch to the back of the loop. Here we go. All right. And then we're going to, again, knit our shadow wraps as one stitch. So it's always what looks like 2 stitches is actually 1. This was our first round. Now we have all regular single stitches on all 4 needles, and on needle 1 and needle 4 We have 16 stitches, so 1 stitch more than on the other needles. Now we're gonna knit 1 more round over all stitches. Okay, now we're back here. So now this almost looks like a triangle. You can kind of see that this is starting to take shape. This is kind of what it's supposed to look like right now. So we have short rows decreased to 10 stitches in the middle. We had 10 shadow wraps on each side. And now we are going to reverse that so we can get around that corner to keep on knitting our sock. So how do we do that? So our 10 stitches in the middle, so 5 at the beginning of this needle and 5 on this side, remain unchanged. And then we're going to work the 6th stitch as we work over here as a shadow wrap and then turn around. So we're not gonna go to the end of the needle. We're going to only the first shadow wrap here, which is the stitch number 6, and then we turn around and then we go from there. All right, so 5 regular stitches, 5 knit stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this was our last shadow wrap before, and now this is our first shadow wrap, which we will work exactly the same way. The stitch below, we pick up the right leg, put it up on here, we knit that part, we'll put it back on the needle. So now we have a shadow wrap right here on the needle. And we turn around, go the other way. So on this needle, it'll also be 5 purl stitches before we work 1 shadow wrap. Okay, our 6th stitch is going to be our first shadow wrap. Yarn in front, pick up this little scarf, put it on our needle, purl stitch, put it back on, and turn around. Now I will work those 10 stitches, so 5 stitches from this needle and 5 stitches from the other until I reach my first shadow wrap. So now we've reached the first shadow wrap, and we're actually going to knit this shadow wrap and then work a new shadow wrap on the subsequent stitch. Now we're gonna have 6 stitches here, 1 shadow wrap, and then the rest still remain unchanged. Now we go back to the other side the same way. I'm working all of the purl stitches until we reach the first shadow wrap on the other needle, needle number 4. So I've reached my first shadow wrap, which I'm going to purl as 1 stitch. And I'm going to work a new shadow wrap on the next stitch. Now we're going to repeat this process back and forth, knitting all the way to the shadow wrap, knitting the shadow wrap, and then working a new shadow wrap until we have reached that last stitch that we actually increased as an extra stitch. And on my needle number 4, this was my increase stitch for the instep gusset, and now this is my last shadow wrap that I am working. All right, work the last shadow wrap, and now we're gonna knit 1 round of stitches to stop here at the beginning of our round over all stitches, and at the same time we will be decreasing those stitches that we increased. Alright, here's the shadow wrap that I'm going to knit, and I'm going to knit this guy, which was my increase, and then I'm going to pull this one over. There you go, decreased. Now we'll do the 30 stitches over the top of the foot. Now we're on our needle 4, so we have this stitch that we would like to decrease and our shadow wrap, so we're going to knit these and then just pull the stitch of the increase over this stitch and then knit the last 14 stitches. And there we are. Successfully, we have done a 90-degree angle with shadow wraps and no holes. Now you can just keep on knitting the pattern of your sock. And you're gonna have a beautiful, beautiful heel. I hope this was helpful to you, and enjoy making more socks.